on Ghana Tonight. Let's bring you our top stories. President John Dramani Mahama gives Chief Justice Tokonu the three petitions seeking her removal. Tonight, details of that letter the presidency writes to the CJ expressing immense disappointment, 10 days to respond. Tonight, we ask what that means for the suit to be heard next week. But also coming up, more of ECG's missing container consignments found as Energy Minister leads efforts to trace culprits and retrieve consignments either in cash or kind. Tonight, Parliament is where several questions are being raised. Also tonight, the Education Minister has big plans to phase out the double-track system, and rural areas might just be key to this plan. It's still Ghana Tonight live here on TV3. Do join us with your thoughts and comments as we stream on Facebook, YouTube, x.com and 3news.com. Use the hashtag Ghana Tonight. Coming up now is Ghana Brief.
President John Dramani Mahama has responded to Chief Justice Gertrude Tokonu's request for copies of petitions seeking her removal. In a letter dated March 28th, the presidency confirmed receiving 3 petitions and forwarded them to the Council of State for consultation. The president has given her 10 days to respond. However, the president expressed disappointment over the alleged leak of the Chief Justice's response before he could review it. The Energy Minister John Jinapor has vowed to find the 1,346 missing ECG containers and get the perpetrators to account for it. Speaking on the floor of Parliament, the minister says he cannot be deterred to investigate the matter to latter.
1,346 containers. Whatever it takes, I'll bring those containers to where they ought to be. They gave us a figure of 3,000. Then they told us it had incurred demurrage of 1.5 billion. I was sworn into office on the 17th. On the 24th, I visited the harbour. At the harbour, I was told the containers were 2,500. That is what aroused my suspicion. I didn't say at the harbour that the containers are 2,500.
Former Minister of Lands and Natural Resources and MP for Damango Samuel Abu-Jinapor says illegal mining is currently getting out of hand and wants the right things to be done. He also lauded the Good Board initiative by government that is expected to help regulate the buying and selling of gold.
I know how complex the issue of illegal small-scale mining is, how endemic, how complex, how complicated, how pervasive, and how its tentacles literally permeates through almost all the facets of our national life and the fabric of our society. So far, he's come out with some interventions. He's brought about the river guards concept, for example. Of course, some people have raised issues about the caliber of people who are supposed to serve as river guards. But that said, that is a novelty, and let's see how that works out.
Embattled former Director General of the National Signals Bureau says he is optimistic he will come out innocent when the dust settles on his case. Earlier, the Accra High Court reduced his bail conditions from 120 million cedis to 80 million cedis with 2 sureties, while his wife's conditions were retained.
not the people who have incarcerated you, because you will know that if your liberty is at the sufferance of those who have captured you, you can never go home. And now the custody of their peace is with the court, and this is what we call the court bail on reasonable terms. If you see that the woman's own was without justification. So we are going to go and ensure that whatever is necessary will be done before the registrar.
The Bank of Ghana has justified its decision to raise the monetary policy rate by 100 basis points to 28%. Speaking at the 123rd MPC press briefing, Governor Dr. Johnson Asiama said the decision was reached through a majority vote, marking a shift from the previous unanimous decisions.
As inflation becomes firmly anchored, as we see the next readings of inflation and we see declines, the committee will reassess the scope for a gradual easing in the policy stance.
Good to know you're still here with us on Ghana Tonight. Just gone by is Ghana Brief. Now, coming up. The clock is now ticking for the Chief Justice after the President provided her with petitions seeking her removal. More of that right now. Now, President John Dramani Mahama has responded to Chief Justice Gertrude Tokonu's request for copies of petitions seeking her removal. Tonight, the President releasing 3 separate petitions from 3 individuals who want the CJ out, but not before expressing his disappointment for the social media frenzy that preceded his receipt of the CJ's request, accusing the CJ of circulating the letter before he, the President, could, and I quote, review its content. Now, the President says because of that leak, it is now constrained to mark the document and again, quoting, as restricted. The President also in the letter indicates he is a step ahead of the CJ. Now, this is why. He indicates that he had sought consent of the Council of State to share copies of the petitions with the Chief Justice at least 48 hours before her letter asking for them. Now, in a rather generous response, the President gives the CJ 10 days to send in her comments instead of the 7 days she had originally requested. Now, she had earlier argued that both the petitions and her response were necessary for consultations under Article 1466 before any committee of inquiry is set up, and that she will be given, and indeed, in the President's response, he says that the CJ will be given full and fair opportunity to be heard, unquote. Let's get right into it. Justice Abdullah is a legal practitioner joining us for a bit more on this story. I appreciate you talking to us, counsel. But we've seen the President's response, and again, I've narrated bits and pieces of it for the purpose of our viewers who haven't come across it yet. What are your readings into his response to the CJ?
Well, I think the entire issues surrounding the petition together with the Chief Justice letter and the response from the President could have been handled much better than currently unraveling. You could clearly see the displeasure in the authored letter of the presidency. I thought that perhaps even if the Chief Justice's office, the Chief Justice herself, erred the president knowing who he is. I know the president probably didn't even see the letter. But I think the letter could have addressed the issues without showing the level of sentiment that it did demonstrate. First of all, because the president's office is the highest office. The Chief Justice, of course, we are not dealing with a small office, but clearly the Chief Justice's letter was a bit rushed and quite emotional, because there's no way the president could have made any determination of a prima facie case against the Chief Justice without eliciting a response from the Chief Justice. And so it is on the basis of this that I say that the whole scenario could have been handled better. Let's not forget that the president, and indeed the presidency, has an obligation to inform us of happenings on every issue. It is in accord with the principles of transparency and indeed the good governance that once the president had received these petitions, it informed the people of Ghana that this is what is going on. And so I do not think that president's initial position was wrong in any way at all. If you read a letter authored by, or at least signed by Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, I think it was quite terse and straightforward that there has been petitions received and it's receiving attention. And that for me was apt because it didn't disclose the content of the petitions. It didn't talk about who the petitioners are. It didn't disclose anything beyond the fact that these petitions had been received. That is in accord with good governance and good conscience and indeed the rule of law, that we be informed of happenings in government. That's the only way we can hold our leaders accountable and indeed also participate in the democratic governance. And so, but one could clearly see that it appears from the reactions of the Chief Justice that it came along with a bit of emotions, as if the request that wouldn't have happened, that the decision would have been taken with or without that request. I do not think that that would have been correct, because there's no way a prima facie case will be handled without any response from the CJ, whether now or even in the future when she's requested to respond to the petition. So, it is on the basis of these that I think that as sensitive as the issues are, it could have been handled better. Now it has even turned political. We are now dealing with NDC against MPP, when in actual fact this should have been a purely legal issue.
I see. So which are you referring to as a motive? The Chief Justice's response or the President's letter in response to the Chief Justice?
First of all, as I've said, the President's reaction, the Chief Justice's letter was needless, because that point would have come to that point in the life of the petition for her removal, would have come there anyway. So it was quite needless. And that's why I say that one could clearly see that there was a bit of rush and emotions towards, with that letter. And hoping that the response from the presidency would have been relatively better. It also came with that same level of reaction, which shouldn't have been the case, particularly because it's coming from the office of the president. I think it could have easily addressed the issues without clear demonstrations of the emotional connection and then there's a resentment that it addressed the letters from the Chief Justice. So it's more like reacting to the same level of emotion from the Chief Justice, which for me was not helpful in diplomatic circles. That letter could have been appropriately address the same issues without necessarily having to.
I see. Counsel,
be emotive.
Indeed. Very well. Counsel, when you look side by side, the president's response and the declarations being sought with the suit at the Supreme Court, what do you think happens next, particularly to the suit?
Well, the suit does not in any way stop the process from going on until there's a positive pronouncement from the judiciary, from the court, ordering a stay of proceedings. Until that is done, even though we can understand that typically, at least as we witnessed under the earlier administration, once the suit is mounted, an unwilling president would tell you that, well, he would want to wait until the outcome of the suit before any further decision is taken. But that in itself may not necessarily be the law as we know it to be until the court positively stays any proceedings on the issue going forward. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been the need for it. But of course, having said that, it does not also mean that when there's a suit, you act in a way that would jeopardize the possible outcome of that suit. And so there's a balancing act where you try to, the process would go on such that it does not jeopardize the action in court.
I see. But there are those who argue that by the president's action of providing the Chief Justice with the 3 petitions against her, the suit at the Supreme Court becomes moot. Where do you sit on that?
That, for me, is difficult to state at this moment, considering that there are a number of reliefs that are being sought. And so some of the reliefs may be quite right to put it the way you do. But I think that it is better to play the wait and see attitude, considering the multiplicity of the reliefs being
right.
sought.
And then you mentioned earlier how it would appear that the situation is becoming the NPP against the NDC. How helpful is this to the situation in setting precedents, really?
So this is exactly why I am displeased with the entire processes. I mean, taking a political turn rather than being seen purely from the legal angle. As you rightly pointed out, there are currently about 2 or 3 different suits that have been filed, all of which are engineered by politically exposed persons, and the lawyers involved are politically known within the circles that they belong to. And so it tends to send a particular narrative out there. And even the discussions out there, you clearly can gauge either lawyers or leaders of each of the political parties' position based on the action that is going on. And so, and when you're able to predict the positions of each side as against the issues going on, it doesn't help. It doesn't help with in addressing the issues from a purely legalistic perspective, and because then everything becomes a political interpretation or rather than legal interpretation, and it muddies the waters, and it does not really help to come out with some if you like sustainable interpretations that can help guide all of us in future. Should anything of this nature ever crop.
Right. The president in his letter also makes reference to Article 146, where he really talks about confidentiality, not only to the person involved, but also to the documents and relevant materials pertaining to the petition or the case, so to speak. Is there justification for that?
Indeed, that is correct. That is correct. That's a correct position. And this is because, as I said earlier, this is a very sensitive issue. Whoever the petitioners are, will naturally have to be protected from being attacked unfairly by people who may want to do mischief. And so it is the reason why the law, as pronounced by the Supreme Court, says that the entire process, at least leading to the removal, has to be handled with this level of discretion to avoid anybody being unfairly attacked and all of that. And also it helps by not dividing the country, because once these matters come into the public domain, there's a level of information that has to come in within the public cycles. And so if you bring everything within the space, the public space, you may end up polarizing the discussions, and particularly because we already polarized politically. And so it is helpful that matters are handled with the level of discretion that it requires, so that by the time the outcome is known, would have at least been certain that that possible outcome was in accordance with the law and practices of this country. Because really, let's all remember that it is the tribunal that is set up comes from some of them are justices. In fact, two of them are supposed to be justices of the Supreme Court, and the Chief Justice is entitled to a lawyer, and so the process is quite transparent. If you look at least the tenets of the law, it's very transparent processes. So, and I'm sure in future, when the outcome is already known, those who may be willing to apply for the proceedings would have the right to have them, and they'll be giving copies of the proceedings. But until then, it is always safer to protect the entire process from the level of antagonism and mischief that may come along with. And so it is indeed, for me, a good thing that it is handled with the level of discretion that we are seeing. But unfortunately now, some of the things are already in the public domain. But I think attempts would have to be made to continuously protect the process from abuse. Let's remember that last year under President Nado, we had a similar what's it called, petitions against the CJ. I think it was by Professor Asari or so. And it was shut down by the president on some grounds. And part of those grounds were the fact that Professor Asari, after having waited for so long, wasn't hearing from the president and decided to bring the matters into the public domain. And that was part of the reasons that was used by the then president to shoot it down. And so with this as a learning curve, I think we should learn to appreciate that going forward, we would have to handle things better to avoid the level of mischief that may be associated with it.
Indeed, Counsel, we'll leave our conversation here. Thank you so much for talking to us. Justice Abdullah is legal practitioner. Now, we had arranged to speak to Minister of State in charge of government communications, Felix Kwakye Ofosu. Unfortunately, we are unable to connect at this time. But let's roll it back again and see aspects or excerpts of that letter the president wrote in the last few hours of the day. It goes on to say that through the secretary to the president, Dr. Callistus Mahama, His Excellency has received 3 petitions requesting your removal as Chief Justice. 2 are dated 14th February 2025 and the 3rd 17th March 2025. Now, on the 24th of March, 7 days after the last one was received, roll it back. 7 days after the last one was received, the president wrote to the chairman of the Council of State forwarding the petitions. Now, I want you to take note of that because I told you that based on the president's full letter, he says, look, I was a step ahead of the CJ. If she's only been patient, we would have got to that point anyway. Because on the 24th of March, the president, through his secretary, makes us know that he wrote to the chairman of the Council of State, Edo Dua Jaho, that he wanted the petitions forwarded to the Chief Justice for initial or preliminary comments on it. Then, that letter that received in the last few hours of the day also goes on to say that the confidentiality attached to Article 146 proceedings extends to all documents and materials. Finally, you will be afforded a full and fair opportunity to be heard, and you're requested to submit your preliminary response within 10 days of receipt of this letter. Now, if you didn't get why, I'd indicated that this was a generous response from the president. In the Chief Justice's original letter to the president, she had requested 7 days within which to respond. Now, the president says, look, you can have 10 days to respond to this letter. We are not in a hurry. That is what the president's letter seems to communicate. But then also it talks about how disappointed the president is that he didn't have a chance to review that letter before the social media or media frenzy around this. Now, I can't go into the mathematics of that, but that is what the president has said. Unfortunately, we still cannot connect with the Minister of State in charge of government communications, Felix Kwakye Ofosu. We would rather move on to some other issues. If we are able to connect, we'll bring back this story. In the meantime, a road crash involving school children in the eastern region initially claiming 2 lives. We'll get the latest on this rather tragic incident. Now, 65 people, including school children, were involved in the fatal accident on the Edukrom-Somanya Highway on their way to Akosombo. The cause of the accident is unknown at the moment, but the bus was transporting them from Ben Kunedu SDA Basic School to Akosombo when the accident occurred, turning the bus on its head, as you see in your screens at the moment. Very disturbing situation there. Dr. Grace Gajekpo is clinical coordinator at the Yilo Krobo Municipal Hospital. She's been speaking to us. Take a listen.
This morning we heard of an RTA about 65 students and elderly people who were involved in an RTA as assessors when traveling from Koforidua coming to Somanya and Fran. And in our facility at Hilo Club District Hospital, about 40 students and tutors were brought to our end. We have 2 who were critically injured, referred to Koforidua Regional Hospital. 20 who had minor injury, which we have treated and they are stable. 2 were brought in dead. Then the rest have been sent to other facilities. That's it.
Let's go over those numbers again. We just heard from Dr. Grace Gajekpo, who is a clinical coordinator at the Yilo Krobo Municipal Hospital. She talks about 41 cases brought to the Yilo Krobo Government Hospital. 2 of those cases perished, 2 transferred to the Koforidua Central Hospital. 30 of those cases have been discharged. 7 are still on admission and 24 others sent to the Titakoshi Government Hospital in Mampong. So that's the state of the accidents that happened earlier this evening. But let's get the very latest now. We're joined on telephone by Dr. Francisca Mensah Dakwa. She's medical superintendent of the Yilo Krobo District Hospital. Doc, good evening to you. Give us the very latest on this incident. How are the victims of the accident doing?
Okay, so as of 4 p.m., we had evacuated 30 of them. They were stable, so they have been seen and discharged for minor injuries. So currently, we have 7 of them in the facility. We have them until tomorrow morning when they can leave.
I see. And for those who have unfortunately perished, are these adults? Are these children? What can you tell us about them?
Okay, so 2 of them were brought in dead. 1 child about 14 years, and then an adult about 50 plus, and a woman, and then a young girl.
That's unfortunate. Have we been able to inform relatives of those who are deceased at this time yet?
So the elderly woman was with her daughter. They joined as church members for the excursion. So she was the one who relayed to other family members. So she had a family on board. The young girl, I think the school has done that. So far, nobody has come in yet. We are waiting for the police to come and do their other investigations. But there were teachers and other school authorities who were present. So I believe that they could take that up as well. But nobody has come in there as a relative about the girl's state or anything. Currently, we are waiting for the police. So we hope that by the time they come, we can do all the other things that are needed before they could take the body away.
I see, Doc. Thank you so much for talking to us, and we wish you the very best. Dr. Francisca Mensah Dakwa is medical superintendent at Yilo Krobo District Hospital. She's just been sharing with us the current state of people who are still on admission, who are likely to be discharged soon, depending on how their conditions develop. But she tells us that, and now we know that the those who are deceased as a result of the accident is one adult woman and one girl child. So this is the latest on this incident, rather tragic. We'll speak to authorities in later broadcasts tomorrow. But let's turn attention to other issues now. Alleged container thieves on the run and the energy minister on their heels, all in the pursuit of more than 1,000 containers belonging to ECG that vanished into thin air from the Tema ports. Tonight, three companies, are under investigations for allegedly stealing ECG cables. Now, the cables are believed to be the content of some containers, you recall, that went missing at the Tema port. This week, the results, a committee investigating ECG's activities at the port revealed at least 1,200 containers had gone missing. 40 of those containers will later be tracked down to a man believed to be of Indian extraction. Since then, about a dozen Chinese have also been picked up in connection to the missing containers. Tonight, the energy minister, who has been on the heels of the suspects alongside national security, says government will do all it can to retrieve the cables or the cost of the cables. Yes, Dr. Jinapo.
Since 2019, this crime is being perpetrated on the state. The then government slept on it. This government will not allow this to continue. And as minister, I would ensure that we curtail this, we follow and apprehend those responsible and retrieve the containers. And wherever the containers are, we'll trace them. And those we've apprehended, we'll not just prosecute them, we'll go to court and seek an order to sell those assets there. I'm writing to the Attorney General. Whoever superintended over this mess will be held liable. The management then and the head of ECG, he has to provide a justification for why he would procure 8 billion when he was supposed to procure 1.3 billion. Because if they had stuck to their procurement plan, we won't have this problem.
Now, you may ask what the cables are used for. Remember, initial reports earlier this year indicated that these containers, sometimes obtained on auction, are resold to ECG, the original owners of the consignment. But tonight, an equally damning revelation. Our correspondent who traveled with the minister reports that two of the companies visited today smelt the cables for aluminum, which is then exported. Now, remember, I said three companies at the start of our coverage of the story, that there were three companies involved in this. The third, we now know that upon a tip-off, absconded with the stolen items, escaping their own warehouse, and authorities in the process. Now, while national security is on their heels, those already arrested will be made to face the law. At least that's what the minister tells us. Meanwhile, it is in Parliament where many questions are being asked. The minister, after his visits to the crime scenes, went to Parliament where this matter continues to be topical. Yes, Minority Leader Alexander Penyumake.
It's a system problem that I will any day support this minister to embark on reforms. It is true that when these containers come, there is some connivance with some customs officials, and they sell these containers, these cables that ECG needs after the supplier has been paid. They sell the container and then people resell back to ECG. Are we pretending we don't know? Instead of us to pay attention and kill the rots, then we come here, then MPP, NDC, issue at stake. It's scandalous. It's serious. It's not MPP, NDC matter. All these public institutions, and sometimes some of the appointees of the previous government, you see them even saying that they are professionals. They were not MPP. Now they come here and then they are dining with you. You're also happy. When you lose power, they turn around and they do this and that and that. and then they are hitting our heads, and we are here. Tackle the issues. $700 million is not cheap money. Go to ECG. Those companies are chasing ECG, and now, because the minister is enforcing the cash waterfall, they say they get only 40 million cedis, and the 40 million cedis is not even enough to pay salary. Those officers at ECG, those directors, they are the ones who should hold them to account and stop this political football. Minister, I do not think an answer to the problem is a political inquiry. Hold the bull by the horn. And I, Kwamina, will support you because I've been there. In fact, I've seen a lot of the rot in our public service system. I've seen a lot of the rot in the SOEs, but they take advantage of us as politicians. The managing director of ECG, the director of procurement, must be seen to be telling us why, as a director of procurement, he will issue a contract, and then the contract is that deliver at the port, bring bill of lading, and ask for payment without even having access to it. And then a minister is to take a blame. A minister must not take a blame on this matter.
Now, speaking on the floor of Parliament, the minister says he cannot be deterred to investigate the matter to the letter.
1,346 containers. Whatever it takes, I'll bring those containers to where they ought to be. They gave us a figure of 3,000. Then they told us it had incurred demurrage of 1.5 billion. I was sworn into office on the 17th. On the 24th, I visited the harbor. At the harbor, I was told the containers were 2,500. That is what aroused my suspicion. I didn't say at the harbor that the containers are 2,500. The report was submitted just this week. It was during the presentation of the report that the committee told me that contrary to the figures they were giving you, over 1,300 containers cannot be accounted for. So those who are on social media and trying to play the political game, let me assure you, it will not deter me. Mr. Speaker, I just came from Kong. We've gone to 4 warehouses. 2 of them are factories. And what they've been doing over the years is that they buy these containers with brand new aluminum cables and then melt them into aluminum rods and export them. I've received a lot of briefing, and I'm getting to know those who are behind it. This has been going on for years. I will stop that, and it will stop right now. But Mr. Speaker, it's not just going to stop. We shall retrieve the containers of the materials. We shall prosecute the perpetrators, and we will sell the rods to recover the cost.
You're still live here on Ghana Tonight. Just gone by is the Energy and Green Transition Minister, Dr. John Abdullahi Jinapo. More on that story when we come back. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're still live here on Ghana Tonight, here on TV3. I want to take you to the courts because a really important issue has been unfolding in the last few hours of the evening. Embattled former Director General of the National Signals Bureau, Kwabena Edubuahin, says he is optimistic he will come out innocent when the dust settles on his case. Earlier, the Accra High Court reduced his bail conditions from 120 million cedis to 80 million cedis with 2 sureties, while his wife's conditions remained the same. So there you have it, him in your shot, leaving court earlier this afternoon, obviously accosted by the media, wanting to hear his first words on how he feels about getting the court to agree with him that the earlier 260 million cedis for his bail was too high. Remember that his lawyer, Samuel Atachia, had made that case strong in court. The court agreed, reduced it from 260 million cedis to 120 million cedis with 2 sureties. That of his spouse, which was originally 80 million cedis, was retained. But again, we want to roll back this issue just before we bring you all what the latest has been, particularly this evening, what we know so far. Remember, what has happened is the bail is granted. There were conditions to be met. They could not meet the conditions. His lawyer then went in to say that, look, that amount is too high. The court agreed to reduce the amount. It doesn't mean they're free. But we know also that some developments have emerged in the last few hours of this evening, not the afternoon, of this evening. And my producer, Dennis Kwaberi, is here with me in the studio to bring us a bit more on this issue. Dennis, we are learning more about this situation, particularly the bail, aren't we?
Yes, rightly so. So we understand that as of this evening, Madam Angela Ejebwatin has been able to meet her bail conditions. So we actually saw her walk out of the court and she's on bail as we speak. It's not like the previous situation where even though she was granted bail by Iyoko together with her husband, they were not able to meet the bail condition. What we are learning this evening is that she in particular has been able to meet the bail conditions and she is on bail at the moment. For the husband, on the other hand, we are unable to confirm if, in his case, he has been able to meet the bail conditions. But it's important for us to roll back because, like you rightly indicated, that initially the husband was granted a bail sum of 120 million Ghana cedis, and that was to be justified. This was the figure that was complained of, for which reason they went to the High Court so that the High Court reduced it. Fortunately for him, the High Court reduced this figure to 80 million Ghana cedis. In the case of his wife, I mean, who was also an applicant in this matter, I think the court did not touch that figure. It still left it at that particular figure for her. And we are just learning this evening that she's been able to meet the bail conditions and she's out. But just to go back, just to refresh our minds on why all of this is happening and the matters that are in dispute, for which reason these two people are being handled by Iyoko. It has to do with some transactions that were done by her husband while he was the Director General for the National Signals Bureau. It is alleged that some transactions that were going to be done in respect of the state, some of the monies went into his private account, for which he used them for personal transactions together with his wife. That's the crux of the whole matter. So the figures that you see here on this table and the properties that have been listed, these are properties that are alleged to have been acquired using parts of that money. And the Iyoko is on their heels, still investigating. We are told that this is not an exhaustive list and that they are still trying to trace all the issues, I mean, all the properties that the money allegedly was used for. So the sum of it is this. So when you look at it, there's supposed to be some property, number 2 Stream, Park Drive, Mayfair Estate La in Accra, which cost $1 million. There's supposed to be another one too Well, so this is in the name of Kwabena Edubuahini and then Angela Ejiboating.
According to the AG's
according to the Attorney General. Yes, remember this was disclosed to the public in a press conference held by Attorney General somewhere earlier in the week. There's also another one, number 6 Edith Avenue, Mayfair Estate, La Accra. Initial cash deposit for this property is said to be $500,000 and that was to buy 5 houses. As indicated in the description, it's the initial deposit. Again, in the name of the couple. There's also another one, number 7, that's also estimated value is $200,000. That description is unknown. It goes on and on. I think the one that's got me out is the one at Oyarifa, Vertex Properties, in which the houses in question are supposed to be 7, each costing $295,000. By the exchange rate, then it is converted to 127 million Ghana cedis, and that's it's one of the many properties in question. But we do know today, after the grant of bail, Mr. Edubuahin very confident that he was going to come out of this
innocent,
clean.
And indeed not surprising at all, because we also know that his counsel, Samuel Atachian, had indicated that, you know, the Attorney General had got it wrong, especially with the narration of the properties owned by, allegedly owned by Kwabena Edubuahin. But, counsel, we also know that, I'm calling you counsel on TV. We also know, right? Yes. We also know, and I mean, for good reason, right? We also know that the AG at that news conference had indicated that there were other suspects in the case, but we've not heard anything about them at all.
And that's quite surprising, because if indeed they were the suspects, as we were told, by now, if they are not on bail, they should have also been fighting for bail by now. And to think that they could only be in custody for not more than 48 hours, something more should have been said about that. But of course, that's a very important point that you raised, and we need to keep an eye on that development to see where really these people probably are in the whole investigation. If it is the case that they have been granted bail or they've been let go altogether, I mean, that is something that we can keep an eye on. But then again, something else came up in court today when the Deputy Attorney General, opposing this bill, also brought to the fore some facts or some information that we didn't know, to the fact that there was an attempt to tamper with evidence. And that was where he made he made a point that at a point, Madam Angela Ejiboating was trying to move currency from their residence to some other places.
And in fact, they said they had that on tape.
That on tape. Allegedly. That's what the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General said. So as this case, unfolds, it gets, I don't want to say interesting, but it gets very complex as it goes. But of course, we look forward to see what is going to happen in the coming days in the midst of all this.
Another thing we'd also have to pay attention to is, one, the AG says, look, I have a lot of evidence. And then today in court, just as you have indicated, they've also come up with the issue of, we think that it could be tampering with evidence. Now, if you have so much evidence, the question that the opposing counsel has been asking is, why haven't you charged? Why is it take? Why? I mean, what is the court process really? Why do you think it's taken the AG so long to get to that point?
Well, so when we spoke, in fact, from what the AG himself has been saying, together with what we spoke to the Deputy Attorney General has been saying, is the fact that the investigation is still ongoing. So I'm thinking that they want to get to a point where they are convinced, beyond every reason, that indeed what we have is good enough for us to charge them or to prefer charges against them and proceed on that. Because all along we have been told that, for instance, when you look at this, they still tell you that this list keeps updating. And I think the point that Deputy Attorney General raised with tampering with evidence is the fact that when it comes to bail application, the reason you would want to keep somebody in custody is to be able to persuade the court that if you allow this person out, this person will tamper with evidence or with investigation. It will appear that maybe the court was not persuaded by that. But if indeed the court was persuaded that if we allow these people to go, they will tamper with investigations and tamper with evidence, there wouldn't be any reason for a court to want to allow people to go and tamper with investigations. So, of course, it's a push-pull kind of thing.
Indeed,
while the
it is.
AG is pushing not to have the bail granted, the lawyers for the suspects are also trying so hard to get their clients released on bail. And I think at the end of the day, the lawyers for the suspects had a good day.
Indeed, they had a good day in
I think
court.
we have lawyer attached here on tape. So if that clip is shown, you can just
we could just listen to it quickly.
Matter.
Let the people who have incarcerated you, because you will know that if your liberty is at the sufferance of those who have captured you, you can never go home. And now the custody of their peace is with the court, and this is what we call the court bail on reasonable terms. If you see that the woman's own was without justification, so we are going to go and ensure that whatever is necessary will be done before the registrar, not them. It is over executed because what they have with them is more than what the judge has ordered. Unless there's bad faith, I don't see why they shouldn't go home today.
Edubuahin had a short message as he was being escorted.
Oh, I have not been charged of anything yet, none whatsoever. So what do you say? You believe you come out from this as an innocent man? Definitely.
Well, there's the suspect in the ongoing investigation. Obviously, he appears to be in good spirit, counsel.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
He says he'll come out of this.
Innocent.
Yes, and true to what the counsel had earlier spoken, that there was no reason for them to still be in custody.
Yeah.
We are just learning, like I indicated, that Madam Angela is out.
Boateng.
Yes,
indeed,
out.
indeed. Yeah. Thank you so much for talking to us, my producer and counsel, Dennis Poaberi there, bringing us the very latest on this investigations into the conduct of the former Director General of the National Signals Bureau, Kwabena Edubuahin, and his spouse, Angela Boateng, and a few others. But that is how we're ending today's program. Thank you so much for your company. Remember that at 7 a.m. tomorrow, Key Points will be here to discuss the week's biggest stories. It would include definitely this issue that we have just discussed. They'll definitely look at the president's letter to the Chief Justice as well, the ECG cables. So you want to make time to watch from 7 a.m. Don't join a minute later. Alfred Okanse will be here with Key Points. I'll see you on Sunday when we discuss issues to do with the Driver Vehicle and Licensing Authority, DVLA. If you have questions, hit me up on the socials and share those questions with me. In the meantime, have a pleasant weekend. I'll see you on Sunday at 2 p.m. for Hot Issues. Good night.
Ghana Tonight.